Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Broken Nose Gaming here. I know it's been a minute since I've made anything. It's been a little busy with real life stuff, work and things like that. Also, I apologize ahead of time for my lighting. It's not that great right now, but it's also like 6 a.m., so I'm just kind of working with what I have. It's kind of dark in general outside right now. But today, we're going to be talking about a new Halloween tank that has dropped, and that would be the tank on screen right now. It is called the Souleater. It is a Tier 8 tank destroyer, and by the looks of it, it's pretty spooky looking. It's got a little face on the front, got a spooky lantern. It's got these like spooky little scythes. This is one of the new Halloween tanks. There is a second one, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But we will focus on this right now. As of the time of this video recording, the Souleater is only available in crates. If we jump up here, I can show you. So this is the Souleater crate. I picked up 3 of these, and I got it on the 3rd try, which I don't recommend because that's not a guaranteed thing. It's a 5% drop chance. So most of the time when I do crates, I end up having to get like 30 crates because you get a little piece of the certificate. I just got lucky this time and got it on the 3rd try. So if we look at the Souleater, like I said, Halloween tank, a little spooky looking. Looks wise, other than like aesthetics, like if we actually look at the tank, it's a rear casemate tank destroyer. It actually reminds me a lot of a Jagdpanzer E100, where you have the casemate in the back and then you have the big old gun. Unlike the Jagdpanzer E100, this thing doesn't do a big amount of damage per shot. The Souleater is only a 108mm main gun, but it does have a trick up its sleeve. That trick is the double shot. So this particular tank will fire 2 shells for every time you fire. So even though the individual shells only do so much damage, since you're firing 2, you double up on it. Now this isn't the first tank destroyer, or I should say first Halloween tank destroyer, that does the double shot mechanic. There is the Helsing. The Helsing also, as you can see, has 2 barrels and has a double shot mechanic. The big difference between the Souleater and the Helsing is more akin to like a M36 Jackson, where it's got like a fully traversable turret. You could also say a Hellcat. The only reason I don't say a Hellcat is the Helsing isn't that fast compared to the Hellcat. But it's kind of got that same armor thing going on, where it's not heavily armored, it's not real tough, so it can't take a lot of hits. Unlike the Souleater is actually a little bit more armored than the Helsing and does a better job of tanking shots. So I can go over the stats really quick. We'll make this real quick. So outside of the double shot mechanic, it doesn't have any other special mechanics. Hit point wise, it's pretty average for a Tier 8 tank destroyer at 1300. The armor, like I said, is better than the Helsing. You have 200 up in the front, 75 on the sides, and the rear is 40. So basically, keep your tank facing as forward as possible. View range isn't spectacular. It is 259 if we round up there. The concealment isn't too bad if you have a full camo crew and you use the concealment equipment slot. While stationary, you can get it to 63% concealment, which isn't too bad for a tank destroyer of its size. While moving, it's 47. While firing stationary, it's 14. Even moving, almost 50% isn't too bad for how big this thing is. If we look at the DPM is almost 2400, which is pretty darn good. The reload time is not spectacular at 13.3 if we round up. So for a whole reload, it is 13.3 seconds. In between your shots when you fire, it is 0.25, a quarter of a second each shell goes out. Shots per magazine, 1, so you only have 1 round in your clip, but you have 2 shots per round. So every time you fire, 2 shells come out. Penetration wise, it is 257 on your armor piercing rounds. This is if you're using calibrated shells, which I'm using because it has heat as its premium ammo. With calibrated shells, your heat pen is 356, which is really good. Uh, that, not quite tier 10 levels, but like, when I'm bottom tiered, I ran up against a Jagdtiger. If I switched over to Heat, I essentially negated his upper plate and casemate and was able to just penetrate it no problem. High explosive, 72, which is not too bad. That's pretty decent for HE round. And your damage per shell is 270 if you're using AP, 240 per shell if you're using Heat, and 350 per shell if you're using HE. So if you think about it, just times those by 2, and you're looking at just a little bit under 600 for your AP, a little bit under 500 for Heat, and almost 700 for HE. So not quite ISU 152 levels of alpha for shots, but it's still pretty strong. It is above average when it comes to some of the other tanks in Tier 8 that you can do alpha-wise, as long as you connect both your shots. For the dispersion, oh, I'm sorry, we skipped aiming time. So aim time is 3.9 seconds, which isn't too bad. I use the gun laying drive. Dispersion, I use refined gun. The vert stabs have been nerfed, and also this is a turretless tank destroyer. So your dispersion is 0.281, which is pretty good, pretty accurate, so you should be able to snipe, and both of your shells should be going in relatively the same place each time. The depression and elevation, 15 degrees up, which is okay. 6 down is not spectacular, but it's still okay. Basically what I like to do, if I can, is get into like a crater or some sort of like dip, and then I can angle the hull up and then have the gun facing out. If I try to keep the very front of the hull covered, it's a hard time to pen the tank. But overall, this tank destroyer, I'm sorry, has a pretty decent armor layout and has the ability to bounce some shots pretty well. Your turn limits, so left to right, is 10 degrees either side. So again, that's sort of like ISU 152 levels. You don't have a lot of left to right, which does mean you're going to be rotating your tank a little bit. And in terms of maneuverability, I've only hit the top speed going downhill, but the top speed is 46 kilometers per hour. Reverse is 18, which is okay. But average, you're going to be hitting somewhere between like 29 and 30 kilometers per hour. Your power to weight ratio is 14.4 horsepower per ton, which is okay for a tank destroyer of this size. It is a 55-ton tank destroyer. Its hull turn rate is not super great, but it's okay at basically 34 degrees if you round up. Terrain crossing capacity isn't too bad either. Hard or road, 110. Soft-ish medium, I guess we can call it, ground terrain is 85, and then soft and water is 74. With the equipment slot that I use, the engine horsepower is 800.4. Speaking of equipment slots, we can go over that really quick. Like I said, I use calibrated shells because that gives me an extra 41 millimeters of pen on my heat round, which is pretty good. Like I said, I was able to basically negate the upper front plate and casemate of a Jagdtiger when I was bottom tiered. You could use the improved ventilation and give, I believe it's like 8% more across the board. Personally, though, I'd rather have the heat pen. Enhanced gun laying drive will help with the aim time. Refined gun will help with the dispersion. I use the defense system on basically all of my tanks, unless I'm playing mad games and I'm using the rammer. I use enhanced armor. I know it's only 3% extra to the hull and everything of the armor, but because the Souleater kind of has this rounded front, I feel like it is a little bit more deceiving than it really is when it comes to trying to pen this tank, and having any extra armor, in my opinions, not a bad deal. Toolbox, pretty standard. The camouflage net mechanic gives you that extra camouflage. You could use the improved optics. You only go up to 270. I mean, it's kind of your choice, I guess. Personally, because of how big the tank destroyer is, I was kind of surprised at the camo values, so I decided to try and improve them as best as I could. I use the engine accelerator because it just gives a 5% boost across the board, so it gives me a little bit more horsepower to weight ratio, a little bit more average speed. The turn rate is okay. You could technically get up to 36. It gives you more if you use the improved control mechanic. Again, that's up to you. And then consumable delivery system. I use the cooldown boost for my consumables, mainly because, as you can see, I don't use any of the special ones. I come from World of Tanks PC, where I didn't have a lot of these special consumables in the beginning, so I just never got around to using them or getting comfortable with them. I'm very basic. I just would rather have my consumables cool down faster. But that's the equipment that I use for this tank. So, like I said, right now, at the time of recording this video, this is only available in crates, but there will be an event which will be starting on the 18th, which I believe will be when I'll be dropping this video. Yeah. Where you will be able to possibly get the Souleater in containers that you can get as you go along. The downside is to get to the containers, you're going to have to pay money, and there's also only a 0.5% drop chance for that tank on the container, unless you open 25, and then you can get one of the tanks here guaranteed by getting a certificate. But that is the other way you can get the Souleater right now, is through this event. So like I said, this event's going to cost money as well. The drop chance is less than the crates, so it doesn't look like you're going to be able to buy the Souleater outright. This event will bring the other Halloween tank, which is called the Lightbringer, which I'm sure we will touch on in another video when it comes to this tank and this event. So we will talk about this at a later time. Let's focus on the Souleater. So I kind of went over the looks a little bit earlier. It's a pretty cool tank. It kind of reminds me of, like, I guess like a Grim Reaper or something, especially with the scythes. I could be wrong. Ironically, the scythes are probably the only thing I don't really like about the tank, since they stick out. Everything else is pretty cool. I like the flowy, tattered fabric and stuff. I think they did a good job when it came to the, like, aesthetics of this tank. You know, like I said, the only thing I'm not a really big fan of is the scythes. But it's pretty spooky, especially the mouth and stuff like that. Definitely Halloween-y. With the name like Souleater, that's why I figured like a Grim Reaper or some sort of like soul collector. So that's kind of like the looks and the stats of the Souleater. I do have a replay. Had some folks on a Discord server that I visit actually talk about this tank, saying how they've been seeing it dying early in matches, which kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, I've been doing really well with it. As a matter of fact, I've been using it in ratings, and I went from like 2700 that I calibrated in some Tier 7 lights. I told them I'm already up to like 3600 just playing the Souleater. And they were actually really impressed, because they said they've been seeing this tank destroyer die really early in games. So I will go ahead and show you guys a 4000 damage replay really quick. So we are on New Bay, which I believe has come back into rotation for the new season, Season 5. I'm not going to do like a blow-by-blow when it comes to this match. I'll just kind of tell you like what I was thinking as I played this tank, and just how I play the tank. As you can see, size-wise, this thing is gigantic, so the camo values are pretty surprising for how big it is. But most of my team's kind of going towards C. I am hanging back because I'm not 100% sure. I don't normally frontline with this tank, but I will support my team, obviously. Basically, every tank except for one other tank destroyer that's still sitting in spawn has gone ahead and gone to C, which is basically all the heavies, so 4 heavies and 1 medium. And the other team decided to do the same thing. Their 4 heavies are going to show up in B. I don't know where the 3 tank destroyers are yet, but I decided, alright, well, if the rest of my team's going to be here, I guess I can come along and I will attempt to help as much as I can. So I didn't want to, I believe I'm still unspotted, but I didn't want to just rush up to the front and try to fire on them. I decided to be sneaky with my giant tank destroyer, and I decided that, hey, maybe I can come around the back here and I can get some shots off while the rest of my team up in the front are busy dealing with them. And I managed to catch this IS-6 by surprise. My IS-5 teammate decides to come with me as well, so I have a little bit of backup, which is nice, even though we both have about the same reload, unfortunately. But I decide to keep my position here. I'm not going to come back around because the IS-6 is waiting for me. Then this K2 decides to come out sideways. If you're a heavy, by the way, don't come around corners like that. You make it very easy. They seem to be focusing my IS-5. I don't know why they don't both push. Maybe they're just worried. They are still focusing the IS-5, unfortunately. I kind of hang around the corner. I'm just waiting for a good time to fire. They take out my IS-5, and unfortunately I only managed to put half my shells into that IS-6. We are currently losing the match, unfortunately. We've managed to knock out 2 of their tanks to R3. I've lost 1 medium, 2 heavies. Now that I know the K2 and the IS-6 are basically kind of waiting for me in the back, I'm going to change my tactics and I'm going to come around the front and try to help out my team. I was originally going to go after this IS-2. I noticed that the 252U was there, and I managed to pop a shot off on him. I finally see the T-28 prototype, so I'm kind of focusing on them. The IS-6 comes around the corner, which is what I was worried about. I hold my shot on the T-28 prototype, and I try to turn my tank around as quickly as I can, and I managed to put a shot into him. He bounces me, which is where I was talking, where my armor is kind of trollish, and I just try to keep the distance as close as possible so he can't hit any of my weak spots, and I take him out. So we're still losing. We're still down by 1 tank. I have our IS-6 on that side, and I have basically 4 tanks over here. The other tank destroyers were taken care of. I decided to take out the 252U because I'd like to try and get as many tanks off the battlefield as I could. The IS-6 takes out the IS-2 shielded. Unfortunately, the T-28 prototype, which has the most HP, took out our IS-6. I'm lucky. I bounce another shot. Like I said, the tank is a little troll when it comes to its armor layout. The tracks also eat a lot of shells. The T-28 prototype, also, don't do what the T-28 prototype does and come around the corner sideways. That is not the best thing to do. But I've managed to block almost 1,200 damage at this point. And now it's just the K2, and I managed to put 1 more shot into the K2, and then the AT-15 finishes him off. But that ends the match, and it is a come-from-behind victory because we were down most of the game, at least by 1 tank. I think at one point we were actually down 2 tanks. So I end up with 4,096 damage. I end up with 1,540 damage blocked, which is pretty darn good. And if we look at the stats for the whole team, I come out on top with 4,096 damage, and our IS-6, unfortunately, who wasn't able to hold that side, ends up with 3,100 damage. But overall, between the 2 of us, we do almost 7,000 damage, and we managed to take this as a win. So that is the Souleater and its performance and what I do with it. I don't like to frontline it, especially because I'll get focused, and my sides and rear are pretty weak. My rear is able to be HE'd by another Souleater, which, as improbable as it is for a Souleater to get behind me, would be 700 damage basically instantly. But if I don't have to frontline, or if I can support my team in a way where they're distracted, that's personally the way I like to play the Souleater. It has armor, obviously, to brawl or kind of tank shots. I think as long as we're still in this new period where it's a rather new tank and it hasn't really been fully figured out yet, I'm sure once people understand the weak points of this tank, it's going to become a lot easier to knock out, especially frontally. So don't rely on the armor in close combat situations for a long time. I could be wrong. Maybe the armor is just really troll and you're going to get lucky a lot. But if I don't have to brawl, especially with the poor traverse, I'd much rather be supporting. But due to the unusual camo ratings of this tank, especially if you have a full camo crew and you use the concealment equipment slot, try to stay hidden as long as you can and then kind of ambush people. But that's how I've been playing the Souleater, and I've been doing fairly well with it when it comes to the amount of damage that I'm putting out and things like that. So yeah, that's my take on the Souleater. Pretty cool Halloween tank. It is unfortunate that you can either only get it in crates or crates. One crate has I guess, a higher drop chance at 5%, and if you get 30 crates, you'll just get it guaranteed. Whereas the other option, which is going to be this upcoming event, it's only got a 0.5% drop chance, and you're looking at basically kind of having to grind out and still spend money on an event anyway, where you're not guaranteed to get it. So I guess pick your poison when it comes to getting the Souleater. You know, I don't like the crate idea. I personally just have a surplus of gold most of the time, so I just kind of will spend a little bit here and there and do like 3 crates or 5 crates, whatever's on special. I just happened to get lucky this time with the Souleater and getting it on my 3rd crate. That being said, that is all I have for the Souleater. We did see a preview of the Lightbringer, and that is definitely a tank that I will probably be getting as well. So when I get the Lightbringer, I will definitely check out the stats, play around with it a little bit, and maybe do a little video on it as well. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until I see you in the next video, take it easy. Bye-bye.